Hello. So in this video, let us discuss about three concepts. One is the steps in interview process. Second one is about the limitations or the drawback of these interviews. And the third one is guidelines to make the interview more effective. So these three concepts, let us discuss in this. So first we'll move on to the steps in the interview process or preparation for it, we can say. So the first one is about preparing for the interview. Now you cannot just call a candidate and without any preparation and conduct the interview. That may not be effective. So here's the interviewer also should be comfortable and the candidate also should be comfortable. So some sort of planning is very much essential to conduct any type of interview. So advanced preparation is very much required if you want to make the interview to be a successful one. So this will enable the interviewer to have a thorough study about the interview process and the procedure and to know what are the objectives of the interviews and which type of interview should be done. Of course, that depends on the type of job profile, and he has to study the resume or CV of the candidate so that he gets acquainted with the candidate and determining the type of information to be sought from the candidate, and the company, the owners or the HR manager should choose a proper interviewing panel. So selecting right interviewers is very essential. So usually the line manager and the HR manager will be there, and if you want any external experts, that also can be included. Again, that all depends on the company policy. So the good interviewer should have the knowledge of the job, knowledge of the interview methods. He should be emotionally matured and he should have a sympathetic attitude. He cannot be very rough with the candidate, mercilessly asking questions, abrupt questions. So such things should not happen. And he should have a sensitivity to the feelings of the others, and it should be like an extrovert behavior. So it doesn't mean that you are conducting an interview, you are superior, so you can ask any type of questions. No, definitely such type of attitude should not be there for any of the interviewers. And selecting the candidates to be interviewed by checking and comparing their applications as well as the test scores. Of course, interview is the last step, right? So before that, the selection test has been conducted. So the interviewer should look at all those scores, and the before the interview starts, the assessment form, the interview assessment form should be made ready, and it has to be thoroughly checked and approved by the board of directors or the management. Second is about the physical setting. So place of the interview should be well lighted, well ventilated, otherwise it will be a suffocated place. It cannot be, the candidate as well as the interviewer both will not be comfortable. So it should be neat and clean, so that the interview happens in a very smooth environment, and there should not be any external noise or interruptions. So when interview is going on, say outside, there should be an attender who should not allow any other visitors, otherwise the interview process gets disturbed, and the candidates also will be uncomfortable, the interviewer also will be uncomfortable. So all this should be avoided. And when a candidate enters the company or organization, see, right from the gate, the security people are very important. Any visitor comes, first they meet the security. So if the security person's behavior is very rude, then anyone who enters the company will enter with the bad mood. So that should not happen. Security should be properly trained in any organization. So the candidate should be well received at the reception area, and he should be guided to the interview room, and there will be a waiting room where all the candidates will be seated. So there should be a drinking water provision, newspapers or magazines, all this should be provided in the waiting room. And always call the candidate at a particular time and start the interview at that time. Of course, 2-3 minutes delay is okay, but the candidate should not be made to wait for 1 hour, 2 hours. So that has to be avoided. Third one is the conducting the interview. This is actually the heart of the interview process. Very important. So here, establishing rapport with the candidate and gaining his confidence. This is the first step. So under conducting the interview, there are so many important steps to be followed. So this is the first one what we are discussing now. So any interviewer shall welcome the candidate with a pleasant smile and offer him a seat. Says, take your seat. So smile plays a very important role. This will make the candidate to be in his comfort level. So sufficient time should be allowed or given for the candidate to answer confidently. It is not asking questions after question. No, if he doesn't answer immediately, another question. So if he doesn't answer immediately, another question, that has to be avoided. Okay. So next is about getting complete and accurate information. So the interviewer should always ask open-ended questions. So what is meant by close-ended questions? Say for example, a question is asked, are you married? What can be the answer? Yes or no. There it is close-end. So you should allow the candidate to speak. So you can say, tell me something about yourself. So candidate will start talking. So this is an open-ended question. So use the language which is clear to the candidate. Of course, it depends on the geographical location. At some places Hindi will dominate, at some places Malayalam, at some places Kannada. So all this, it all depends on his nature. So if it is an institution where English is prominent, so interview should happen only in English. Only then you can judge whether he will be a fit to this organization or not. So that has to be very properly thought of. And listen attentively and patiently. So interviewers should be the good listeners too. Okay, if you are not in a position to listen, then you cannot conclude anything about the candidate. Then recording the observations and impressions. So whenever the candidate mentions some points, the interviewer should note it down in the assessment form. So when you are noting it, if imagine you are an interviewer, so there's a candidate sitting opposite to you and you are conducting the interview. You ask some questions. So the candidate answers. So make some points for your reference. So this will help you to make proper judgment while making the final assessment. And not only that, the candidate also will feel comfortable because he feels that his words are given some importance, and because of that the interviewer is noting those points. So in both ways it will be helpful. Then closing the interview. Now, how important is the beginning of the interview? Equal weightage should be given for closing the interview also. Okay, so usually interview is a tiring situation for the candidate and it should not be abruptly ending. Okay, so before closing the interview, the candidate should be asked if he has any questions. Now you have asked so many questions, right? He also would like to know about the organization and about the job. So it is his right to ask for some clarifications. So for that, you need to give a scope. He may not ask. Everyone will not be, extroverts. So some of them will not ask. They will only oblige to the interviewer. So as an interviewer, you give them the chance so that he is free to ask any questions related to the employment. Then don't close it suddenly. So after he says this, then slowly it should be a smooth closure. You can make some sign by keeping the pen down so that he gets a message, okay, interview is almost over. Then he will be very much relaxed. Then you can push the chair back or stand up and say thank you. So by this he will also be made very comfortable. It's very important. So fourth one is about the evaluation of results. So once the interview is over, the interviewer should evaluate the candidate's suitability for the job. And this, the evaluation is based on the observations and the informations collected during the interview. So not only that interview, because the previously there are so many tests conducted, one or more type of tests that are been conducted. So you have to look at the forms also and give some weightage to the selection test, give some weightage to the interview. So all those things has to be properly balanced. So evaluation can be done either by grading from A to E or by allocating some marks. It depends. Again, it depends on the company policy. So when you mark some grade or when you assign some marks, always you should justify it. Why you have given that. So there should be a brief explanation, justifying for the grade or the marks that you have allotted. Okay, it may be required by the higher top management to know what is the reason for giving this marks. So we need to make some points which will justify the marks that has been allotted to the candidate. So once the evaluation is done, a list of selected candidates is prepared. Okay, so this is about the process. Now let us move on to some of the drawbacks or the limitations of the interview. Every process has a drawback, right? So interview also has a limitation. So what are the limitations? There are many. One is about the personal bias. See, interviewers are also human beings, right? So there is some biasing happening always, some favoring situations and non-favoring situations. So all those things will happen. Sometimes the interviewer may not like the hairstyle of the candidate and the dress that he has worn or his fluency in the speech. So all those things will affect the judgment. So as far as possible, you have to minimize the personal bias. That not be 100% possible, but we need to reduce it. Second one is about the halo effect. What is halo effect? This is judging by appearance, a first impression we can say. So here a single prominent character affects the judgment of the interviewer on all other traits. I'll give you an example here. Now, interviewer may feel a poorly groomed candidate is stupid, and sometimes he may feel a properly groomed candidate is the best, and he will overrate his other qualifications. So both are equally dangerous. So we need to minimize this also. There should not be any prejudice. Third one is about the constant error. Now, what happens here is in an interviewer, the interview of previous candidate will also have the influence on the next candidate. It could be in favor or against, it depends. What does it mean? In simple terms, I'll mention here. A qualified candidate may be underrated just because the previous candidate was brilliant. So this is one of the constant error happening in the interviews. So immediate pass, there could be a candidate who is exceptionally good. So the candidate who comes next may not be of so level, but directly don't reject. So we need to keep till all the interview is done, and then accordingly rating has to be given. Fourth one is about the leniency. Leniency in the sense it is assigning high scores drastically. It could be due to lack of confidence or also because of lack of interest in rating. Both are possible. Sometimes it could be opposite also. Opposite of leniency is toughness. So here the interviewer is more rigid. He don't allot marks. Very low marks he will allot. Maybe due to over expectation or lack of human contact. See, only when you mix with people, you know about the people's behavior, how they speak, how they behave. If you are not mixing with the people in general, you will not know the psychology of the human beings. Okay, so it should not be both. It should not be lenient. It should not be tough. It should be a balanced and a matured effort is very much essential by the interviewer. Fifth one is about the projection. Now, what do you mean by this projection? This also happens. This is an error, we can say, errors in an interview process, where an interviewer expects his own knowledge, skills and values in a candidate. How is it possible? Now, the interviewer may select a candidate who resembles him in terms of maybe appearance or manners or behavior. So, that should not happen. You are an individual, candidate is another individual. Everybody is different. So, don't judge based on your, on, the resemblance. That should not be done. Sixth one is about the stereotyping. So what is this stereotyping? This error, this is also an error. Just like the previous one, projection is an error, here stereotyping is also an error. So this error arises when the interviewer believes some association between a particular type of personality and a distinguishing behavior, what we call as trait. For example, there are so many examples, I will mention one. Interviewer may be of the opinion that candidates from rural areas have less hygiene habits. May be true or may not be true, we don't know. It depends on the type of person. So once you select him, you train him. So just because of that stereotype, understanding, don't judge that all people coming from rural background are having low hygiene. Need not be true. If you feel that and if the candidate is good, you train. Anybody can be trained, right? So this has to be considered. So these are some of the drawbacks. Now let us see the third aspect in this video, guidelines to make effective interview. Some of them I already mentioned earlier, but let us mention it in a structured manner. And first one is interview should have definite time schedule with sufficient time for its conduct. That means it should not be hurried. Because you have to go somewhere, you cannot conduct interview in a hurry. You will not be in a position to extract maximum from the candidate and your judgment may go wrong. Then second, a personal approach should be adopted to make the candidate feel at ease. Very important. First of all, the candidate will be stressed. Interview means any candidate will be normally stressed. However, we say it should be calm, it will be stress for the candidate. He will be under the impression what type of questions will be asked, whether I'll be able to answer those questions, and how the attitude of the interviewers may be. All those things will be in the mind of the candidate and he will be under pressure, definitely under pressure. So the interviewer should develop a friendly and a cordial relationship with the candidate, just welcoming him with a smile and offering him a seat. Simple things, but it will have a tremendous impact. Build up a rapport. So when you build up rapport, the candidate will be more comfortable and he will be more free to open up. Okay, so even the interviewer busy, he must give the impression that there is sufficient time for discussions. You may have to go, but it doesn't mean that you are having to go somewhere, so you have to conduct the interview at an abrupt rate. That should not happen. Candidate should not know that you are in a hurry. You have to allow him to speak comfortably. Okay, and also the candidate should not be made to wait unnecessarily, and the interest and the individuality of every candidate should be respected, because every human being needs to be respected. Okay, you are in a higher position, therefore you are interviewing a candidate. Doesn't mean that the candidate who is coming here should be underestimated. No, definitely not. Third, interview should have an element of privacy and should not be conducted in the presence of unconnected persons. Now imagine you are an interviewer. You have some guests who are not connected to the company or maybe from other departments. So a candidate has come for an interview. You call him. In presence of those unconnected people, you should not conduct interview. Okay? The candidate will not be comfortable. Then, fourth one, the interview should be based on the checklist of what to look for in a candidate. You cannot expect unconnected things for the job profile, right? So such checklist should be prepared on the basis of job requirements. So what type of job he is going to perform? So what is the checklist for that? And each attribute may be assigned a specific weightage. It could be rated as A, B, C, D, or maybe in a scale of 1 to 10. So each attribute should have this weightage mentioned. And fifth one, competent, trained, and experienced person should be chosen as interviewers. Freshers or unexperienced persons cannot conduct interview. Even if they conduct interview, it may not be judged properly. So experience matters a lot. Then, proper method of interview should be employed depending on the nature of the job. If you are conducting interview for an admin position, the type of question should be different, or the method of interview may be different. If you are calling him for a security, again the method will be different. If you are interviewing a candidate for a receptionist or a computer programmer, see each job profile has its own method of interview conduction. So accordingly you need to proceed. Seventh is a set of guidelines should be given to the interviewer. Suppose the interview panel has one coordinator or a member secretary, or that could be usually from the HR department only. So if there are multiple interviewers, so he has to give a clear guidelines about the do's and don'ts, or the steps to be followed, the method to be adopted, all those things. He has to brief about the assessment form. Everything has to be properly explained. And eighth one, there could be a proper coordination between initial and succeeding interviews. So first few candidates are interviewed in different manner for the same post. Last few candidates are conducted in a different manner. That should not happen. There should be a proper coordination. Then ninth one, the interviewers should listen carefully to what the applicant says, and the information collected should be recorded for your reference. And it's not that interviewer keep on asking questions. So here the interviewer will talk less. He will only ask some questions and the candidate will speak more. Okay. Then 10th one, the interviewer should try to minimize his personal bias or prejudice. As I told you earlier in the drawback, this cannot be made zero, but the interviewer should try to minimize. 11th one, the interviewer must not end the interview abruptly. Close it tactfully so that the candidate feels satisfied. You asked a question, and the candidate could not answer. Okay, thank you. No, that should not happen. You ask him some other questions, even at the end, where he is able to give the answer, so that he goes out satisfactorily. Whether you choose him or not is different matter. That depends on your rating, it depends on his performance. But as a human being, we should have that sympathy or a good rapport so that he goes out happily. Okay, that's all in this video. Now here three concepts I have explained. So the possible questions could be explain the steps in interview process, or what are the limitations of an interview, then mention the guidelines to make the interview effective. You can write in your own words. You just listen to this and read the notes and don't by heart anything, understand it. These are totally the general concepts, more of personal relations. Okay, so see you in my next video. Thank you.